So this is Rebekka and me, and we're going to talk a little bit about circular economy in a direct context of the Global River Center. And my name is Emma, and then together with Rebekka, we've been assisting the Global River Center in their efforts in circular economy, and we've also been part of the planning and facilitation of this workshop. And we are both recent graduates from Copenhagen Business School, where we have studied business and development studies. And we also did our master thesis together, where we wrote about the circular economy and material innovation in the textile industry. And that's also one of the reasons for why we are here today.
Yes, and another reason that we're here today is also because we find the Global River Center to be a super interesting case, because we're both, and I guess that we all in this meeting here have in common, very ready for action-based change. And we think that the Global River Center is at the right stage right now in the development and design of the centers, and have the right kind of open-minded administration to bring the solutions of tomorrow and the people that want to make those solutions together. So it's very exciting.
And as Anita, as you just touched upon, we hope that you've all had the possibility to watch our 2 videos on circular economy, because we are going to get a little bit technical in this presentation, so that you can feel well equipped to answer questions and proceed in the discussion that will be facilitated by Elizabeth by the end of all these presentations. But our short presentation will introduce you, as mentioned, to circular economy in the context of the Global River Center, and we will give you an overview of what have already been thought about, and hope that you can maybe spin further ideas from these ideas, and that we can avoid similar ideas from overlapping.
Yes. So let's start by diving into the architecture, infrastructure, and design of the very center itself. How can this be circular? And we've already touched upon this a little bit. Obviously, there's unlimited ways, and that's why this is super exciting right now. As Morten talked about, it's almost like we have a frame that can be added to with the steel structure. We can kind of be artists with an empty canvas and some paint and think creatively, which is super exciting. We have here highlighted, though, a few things that the Global River Center has considered that is very important, but don't have any, as I said, locked solutions on yet, where you can come in and we can together find some really cool circular solutions. So for the architecture and design, let's begin with the fact that beauty should meet sustainability and functionality. Functionality being the fact that one should always start by asking, as Deborah also talked about, the wish and the need of the community. The least circular thing is to make something that is not used. On the beauty side, it's important to make a building or infrastructure that people can tie some sort of emotional connection to. One can be creative and almost look at buildings as an art piece. If we want to bring it to the, and this is the extreme, you can look at the UNESCO sites as an example. Beauty makes people want to keep the building alive for generations to come and to enjoy the human extension of culture and history into the building. This is a perfect example of slowing the loop. Importantly, we also have to obviously consider robustness. One can make a building that people want to keep alive, but if we don't have the robustness for it to actually be kept alive and it falls apart, then that kind of, the first point just kind of disappears. Thirdly, we should reuse parts. This includes using parts from old buildings into new ones, such as windows, doors, concrete, etc. Interestingly, if you think about it, all of the above are kind of connected. For example, by reusing old aspects from one building into a new one, you can get a certain aesthetic that can only be found when reusing parts of old buildings or old materials, giving a kind of random or historical cultural element that cannot really be designed in a studio, which is really interesting. So you can actually play with that kind of artist part of it and the beauty of it in that way. Fourth, very important to consider, is design for reversibility, disassembly, programmatic flexibility, and flexible housing.
And one thing that we find especially relevant to touch upon now in the context of the Global River Center is this flexible housing. But what is flexible housing actually? Flexible housing means that rooms and buildings, they should be flexible and changeable to meet different needs that may occur now in the present, but also other ones that may occur in the future. And the principle behind flexible housing is this incomplete building, where a basic frame will open up for personalized interpretation, in terms of number of rooms, the functionality of these rooms, and positioning of rooms, and so on. And if we move on, here's an example of flexible walls. Here, you can see these are different rooms that you can turn into different functionalities and positioning of rooms. So for example, if you are gonna have a big wedding, social gathering, you can completely remove these walls and have one big open space. Or you can turn it into many small rooms for private offices, workspace, whatever you need. And one exciting thing is maybe also to try to think circularity into the walls themselves. We were talking about maybe making chairs that can be hooked together to make walls, or that you can maybe make these walls out of biodegradable material, so that once you're done using them, you can just compost them in your garden and use it to nurture the soil and garden. But how does this actually relate to a circular economy in theory? Well, if we take a look at the 9R framework here, we would argue that this flexible housing relates to the R2 strategy, which is the third from the top, because we increase the efficiency of the building. So the idea is that one building can make it in place of two buildings, and that one room can make it in place of 2 rooms or 3 rooms. And by doing this, we also manage to narrow the resource flow, because we need fewer resources to build our buildings. And thereby we comply or align with this circular economy. Just talking about the resources again, and also as Deborah also mentioned, the importance of using local resources when, for example, building these flexible walls. Yeah.
Yes. And also, as Morten touched a little bit upon, obviously, we want to bring circularity into the energy and water systems of the center as well, which is why the Global River Center has settled for big visions in regards to sourcing water and energy in a circular way. He touched a little bit upon the fact that, well, Global River Center is going to be located across sub-Saharan Africa in areas where it's going to be a lot of access to sun, which is why there's also planned to build huge solar panel parks in each center, and also storage for rainwater that can be collected and used later. And this is quite obviously circular, because, as we all know, renewable energy is crucial in a circular model, according to the butterfly diagram. And addressing the closed flow narrow framework, one could argue that when sourcing renewable energy, one closes the resource flow as renewable energy keeps flowing in the system. It's also relevant to mention narrowing, as we then lower the pressure on using non-renewable resources such as coal and petroleum. Here, we just kind of want to invite you to the fact that there's so many cool solutions that can be brought using technical expertise, engineering, that Emma and I we don't have that background. So it's really exciting here how we can kind of keep the water and energy flow in the center and in the community as much as possible. New technologies that can allow for this. We're very open here, and to later on brainstorm that with you.
Yeah, and let's move into how we can incorporate circularity at the daily operations of the Global River Center. And in this case, we actually found a case example of where circularity and health, they overlap. And we want to highlight this one example that could be a possible relevant partner for the Global River Center, which is She4She pads. As we write here in the presentation, the UN, they believe that 1 out of 10 girls in the sub-Saharan Africa, she missed school during her period because conventional tampons and pads are too expensive. And this social enterprise, which is She4She pads, they found a solution to this problem by providing these reusable pads at an affordable price. So how does this relate to a circular economy? Well, by replacing these single-use pads with one that can be reused over and over again, She4She pads, they make use of the R3 strategy, which is reuse. And by doing so, they also slow the resource flow, because they extend the lifespan of these menstruation pads from, well, a few hours to up to 1 year. So this is super relevant, especially in the context of the Global River Center. Another idea that we also were discussing is to the Global River Center, they're going to have this trade platform. But what if we turn part of this trade platform into a rental platform? What does this mean actually to have a rental platform? Well, it means that instead of buying the products, you rent the products and you just have them in your possession for a certain time period. And when talking about circular economy, this business model is called access over ownership. And it's called access over ownership because the consumer has access to a product so that this product can satisfy the need of the consumer instead of him or her owning the actual product. And this way we really increase the product efficiency because we only need one product to satisfy the need of maybe 5 people instead of 5 products for each of these 5 persons. And if we take a look at the 9R framework, yeah, the most obvious R strategy is the R1 rethink, because as I just mentioned, the product the use becomes much more efficient. R1 rethink is the second from the top. We would also argue, Rebekka and I, that there's a high possibility that it will be much easier to apply the R4 repair and R5 refurbish, because as the Global River Center, they will maintain the control and the care of these products. They can also make sure to, for example, always have access to spare parts, and maybe also employ people that have the skill set to actually constantly repair and refurbish these products. And when doing this, we managed to both narrow the flow, but also to slow the flow. We narrow the flow because we need 1 product instead of 5. So we lower the pressure on these virgin resources. And we also slow the flow when we repair and refurbish these products so that they can live for a longer time. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm just going to end off by saying kind of the same thing that I said in the beginning, which is that yes, we have these ideas flowing in the start of this this journey, and as Elizabeth said, there's we're going into building process now, and we're going into still kind of raising questions of how to implement circularity, and there's so many opportunities. And as I said, there's an empty canvas. There are some plans and some steel structures and all of this, but there's also so many opportunities, and this is where we want to really invite you later on to the discussion and also in the questionnaires to just share whatever you think could be a possibility. There's no thought too big or too small. Just anything that you want to share is so welcomed, and we're very excited to hear more from you. Just as a very last note as well, as Deborah talked about the report that Footprints did, both me and Emma read it and we loved it, and I think there's so many good actual case examples that are highlighted in this case study and report, and I can just encourage everyone to read it and learn from them. And that's it. If anyone has any questions, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma and Rebekka. I'm sure that there are going to be several questions from the audience. They were already in the comments in the chat box. I can tell you already there are some approving comments, and I was saying that it's a very exciting concept, and your presentation as well. I'm just going to, before we go to the questions, I'm just going to remind you that you can find in the chat box, you can also find a link to the YouTube video that Emma and Rebekka pre-recorded before the session. So you can find it there again, and you can kind of rewatch it just to get used to the general concept and for what they presented there. And then also, as we go into the question, I'm just going to, as Rebekka said as well, there is already in the chat box, there is a link to the Google form where you can just leave any of your comments or ideas that you have. And as you said, there's no such not idea that is too big or too small. So just go there and leave your comments there, and we would take it further from them after the session. So yeah, now it's time for the questions. Do we have anybody who can you just stop sharing the presentation? This way I can see.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Stop share.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
There you go. Any questions? Anybody who's willing to, any comments? I don't have some questions necessarily, but if you also have any comments right now, you can also just unmute yourself or raise your hands and take it away. Anybody?
There will also be time after if
Yeah.
you can if you think of something. That, oh.
Yeah. So I'm just thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious about the part of your presentation that showed buildings that can be repartitioned in several ways. And I'm wondering, is this repartitioning for the entire building or just the interior? So we still have a fixed structure, and then for the interior walls, we create the opportunity for repartitioning.
I think Elizabeth can maybe talk a little bit more about this in detail, but the whole idea of flexible, well, maybe not, flexible housing is that you can, in theory, build the entire building on different parts and bring reuse of not just the interior, but also the exterior of the building. But I know that we have the steel structure, so I don't know how much of the actual building there can be flexible, but both really.
But part of this flexible housing is also that when, for example, when this exact building is not usable anymore or for any need, you can also take each of the parts and model them into something new. So I think flexible housing also that's a broad term, covers many aspects.
Yes, so just a follow-up, is this still in the conceptual stage, or we have such houses in some countries now? And how robust are they in areas where there are earthquake and stuff?
Oh, good question. Maybe Elizabeth can say something first, and then I can say something after.
I would like just to comment on the flexibility that is needed. I mean, if we are open, and number one, we are in the process of building the first center. Well, actually, we have not started building yet, but we would get there hopefully within the framework of this year. And then we are this far that we are validating the concept, and we have the drawings. We are about to make these drawings into working drawings and getting it into the engineering process, and eventually then the suppliers and all that are in place. So we are at the stage where it can still be, adjusted to good ideas. That is why this design workshop is, as we think, right timed to actually get these ideas. But on the concept note and on the business case note, which is critical, we need to balance these good ideas with how can we underpin or support our business case. We need to have that flexibility that Emma and Rebekka is suggesting, because we would have various kind of not only events, but also people or businesses or partners that would lease space with us. And we would have some already predefined flexible pop-up kind of stands, but the shop area or the trade area, even actually the whole area that contributes to the income, needs to be flexible according to what is relevant. Talking about this relevance all the time, along with efficiency, effectiveness, and how it can eventually be sustainable and create the impact, is at the top of our mind. So that flexibility is needed. It's a given criteria, actually.
Yes, but you also mentioned a very interesting thing about earthquake proofs or how robust that makes the building, and I'll look more into that actually after, because it's a very good question. I've seen the case that I've read about have been mostly in the Nordics, but I will look into this question, especially about the natural.
I'm sure he has an idea about it. And according to, okay, Morten is not with us, but the steel structure is saving quite a bit for us in that aspect. It's another.
Yeah.